Hello, travelers, and welcome to HFY Stories. I'm Robert Litwin, and I will be your human narrator. Today we will embark on a particularly captivating story within the stars. Let's begin.
Commander Velkas watched the human delegation with barely concealed amusement as they presented their military capabilities to the Galactic Defense Consortium. The crude kinetic weapons, chemical explosives, and metal projectiles looked like artifacts from some primitive museum. "Fascinating," he said, not bothering to hide his condensation. "Your species still uses gunpowder?" Captain June Brown, representing Earth's Unified Defense Force, remained stoic. "Among other things, yes." The assembled alien military leaders changed glances. Some amused, others pitying. The Zeftari delegate's crystalline form chimed with what passed for laughter among his species. "Captain," General Thexmore of the Hegemony spoke up. His forearms gesturing dismissively. "We appreciate Earth's enthusiasm to join our alliance against the Devourers. But perhaps your people would be better suited for support roles. Supply lines, perhaps." Brown's jaw tightened. "With respect, General, you haven't seen our weapons in action." "We've analyzed your technology," Velkas replied, pulling up holographic displays. "Kinetic projectiles traveling at mere kilometers per second. Chemical reactions that produce crude explosive force. Vehicles that run on combustion engines." He shook his head. "The Devourers' bioarmor can withstand plasma volleys that could level cities. Their ships regenerate from quantum disruptors. What exactly do you think bullets will accomplish?" "Sometimes the old ways work best," Brown said quietly. The briefing ended with Earth being assigned to logistical support, a polite way of keeping them out of real combat. As the human delegation left, Velkas heard several delegates placing bets on how quickly Earth would surrender when the Devourers reached their system. 3 months later, these same delegates watched in horror as the Devourers' fleet swept through the Kepler defense line like it was tissue paper. Plasma weapons that had obliterated asteroids bounced harmlessly off their bioships. Quantum disruptors that could tear holes in space-time were absorbed and redirected by their living hulls. The retreat to the Sol system was a rout. "They're unstoppable," General Thexmore transmitted from his fleeing flagship. "Their ships adapt to everything we throw at them. Weapons that worked yesterday are useless today." Velkas stared at his tactical display as the alien armada, hundreds of writhing organic ships the size of cities, emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system. Each vessel was a living nightmare of teeth, tentacles, and predatory intelligence. "Human fleet, this is Admiral Velkas," he transmitted. "You need to evacuate immediately. Your ships won't last 5 minutes against—" "Negative, Admiral," came Captain Brown's calm reply. "Terra Defense Fleet is moving to intercept." "Brown, you're commanding suicide! Your primitive weapons can't—" "Watch and learn." Velkas' sensors showed the human fleet advancing. Ships that looked like flying metals compared to the sleek alien vessels. No energy shields, no exotic matter hulls, no quantum weaponry. Just steel and ceramic, and determination. The Devourer ships spread out, confident in their invincibility. Their bioarmor had adapted to every advanced weapon the galaxy could produce. They had evolved beyond conventional warfare. Then the humans opened fire. The first salvo wasn't exotic energy or quantum manipulation. It was metal. Thousands of depleted uranium slugs, fired from railguns at significant fractions of light speed. The kinetic energy was astronomical. But more importantly, it was simple. Pure momentum transfer. The Devourer bioarmor, evolved to absorb and redirect energy, had no adaptation for old-fashioned kinetic impact. The slugs punched through their hulls like bullets through wet paper. Impossible, Vel'Kaz breathed. The humans weren't done. As Devourer ships tried to close distance, Earth's fleet unleashed weapons that made no sense in modern warfare. Nuclear missiles with simple fission warheads, chemical explosive torpedoes, even old-fashioned proximity mines that detonated with pure TNT. Each weapon was devastating, not because of advanced technology, but because of its primitiveness. The Devourer's biological systems had no evolutionary response to crude chemical explosions of radiation poisoning from simple uranium decay. Their adaptation is their weakness. Brown's voice crackled over the comm. They evolved to counter sophisticated attacks. They never evolved to counter a club to the head. A massive Devourer flagship, a writhing mass of organic weapons and adaptive armor, found itself crippled by something it had never encountered. A spread of simple proximity mines filled with depleted uranium shrapnel. The primitive explosives tore through bioarmor that had shrugged off quantum disruptors. Vel'Kaz watched in stunned silence as the human fleet systematically dismantled the Devourer armada, using weapons that belonged in a museum. Kinetic bombardment, chemical explosives, simple, brutal, effective. How? He finally managed to ask. Brown's response came through the static of battle. We never stopped being good at killing things the simple way. While you were perfecting energy weapons, we perfected violence. The battle turned into a rout, but this time, Devourers were the ones fleeing. Their bioships, adapted to counter every advanced weapon in the galaxy, had no defense against humanity's arsenal of ancient brutality. As the surviving Devourer ships retreated into hyperspace, Vel'Kaz found himself looking at the human fleet with new respect. These weren't primitive savages using outdated weapons. They were apex predators who had never forgotten how to hunt. Brown, he transmitted, perhaps we should discuss integrating human weapons into our defensive strategies. Already ahead of you, Admiral, came the reply. We've been retrofitting our old weapons with your FTL technology. Kinetic bombardment platforms that can strike from hyperspace. Nuclear mines that can be deployed across entire star systems. Her voice carried a cold satisfaction. The Devourers adapted to fight the future. They forgot about the past. As Vel'Kaz processed this information, his sensors picked up something that made his blood freeze. Deep space monitoring stations were detecting massive energy signatures beyond the galactic rim. Not Devourer bioships, but something else entirely. Captain, he said slowly, what exactly are those energy readings? Brown was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that made Vel'Kaz's species equivalent of hair stand on end. Admiral, the Devourers weren't the apex predators of their galaxy. They were running from something. Something that just figured out where they went. The deep space sensors screamed as reality itself began to tear apart the galaxy's edge. Through the growing rifts came ships that dwarfed even the largest Devourer vessels. Geometric impossibilities that hurt to look at directly. "Brown," Velkas whispered. "Please tell me you have something primitive enough to kill gods." Her response came through the growing chaos of space-time distortion. "Admiral, you're about to find out exactly what humans do when the universe itself wants us dead." The geometric ships that emerged from the rifts defied comprehension. They weren't built. They were grown from folded space-time itself. Each vessel, a living equation that rewrote reality around it. Where they passed, stars aged millennia in seconds. Planets collapsed into geometric impossibilities, and the very concept of causality became negotiable. Admiral Velkas stared at his instruments as they registered readings that shouldn't exist. "What are we looking at?" Captain Brown studied the tactical display with grim intensity. "The architects. The species that built the Devourers as hunting hounds." Her voice carried the weight of terrible knowledge. "We found their records in the Devourer ships we captured. They're not just aliens. They're from a previous iteration of reality." Previous iteration? The universe before this one. They survived the heat death of everything, rebuilt themselves in the quantum foam between realities, and have been systematically harvesting each new universe as it emerges. Brown's fingers flew over her controls. The Devourers were their biological weapons, designed to consume entire galaxies and report back. Through the observation deck's reinforced windows, Velkas watched as one of the architect's ships, a writhing mass of non-Euclidean angels, casually rewrote the orbit of Jupiter. The gas giant simply moved its new trajectory calculated by minds that thought in dimensions his species couldn't perceive. "How do you fight something that can rewrite physics?" General Thexmore's transmission crackled with despair. "The same way we fought the Devourers," Brown replied. "By being too stupid to know it's impossible." Velkas watched the human fleet disperse throughout the solar system, taking positions that made no tactical sense. Their ships were moving to coordinates that put them in the worst possible firing positions against the architect vessels. "Brown, what are you doing? Something the architects won't expect. They spent billions of years fighting civilization that understand the universe. They've never fought a species that's really, really good at breaking things." The lead architect ship, a cathedral of impossible geometry that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, began broadcasting in mathematical concepts that translated as primitive organisms. Your galaxy's harvest is complete. Surrender your quantum essence for processing. Brown's response was characteristically human. "Go to hell!" The architect's ship's reply as a wave of distorted space-time that should have crushed the human fleet like insects. Instead, The human ships simply weren't there anymore. Cloaking technology? Velkas asked. Better. We're using something the architects eliminated from the reality eons ago. Brown's voice carried a savage satisfaction. We're using luck. The human ships reappeared, scattered throughout the solar system, their positions determined not by tactical computers, but by random number generators. Chaos theory weaponized into a military doctrine. Impossible, the architect ship broadcast. Quantum probability cannot be manipulated without... A nuclear warhead materialized inside the architect vessel's hull. Not teleported, not phased through. It simply appeared, probability mathematics having been told to go sit in a corner, while human randomness took the wheel. The explosion was magnificent. The architect's ship, built from folded space-time and exotic matter, had no defense against the simple conversion of matter to energy. It crumpled like paper, its geometric perfection destroyed by the crude application of E=mc². How? Velkas breathed. Turns out when you build your entire civilization around mathematical perfection, you become vulnerable to mathematical chaos, Brown explained. The architects eliminated random chance from their reality. They can't adapt to pure illogical randomness. More human ships appeared in impossible positions, their locations determined by coin flips and dice rolls. Each appearance was followed by the deployment of weapons that belonged in a museum. Chemical explosives, kinetic projectiles, and simple nuclear fission. The architects, beings of pure logic who had survived the death of universes, found themselves facing an enemy that operated on principles they had forgotten existed. Luck, chaos, and the beautiful stupidity of refusing to accept that something couldn't be done. Fascinating, one architect ship transmitted as it was pummeled by tungsten rods fired from railguns. Your species weaponizes entropy itself. We weaponize everything, Brown replied, watching as another architect vessel was destroyed by a proximity mine that had appeared in its path through sheer coincidence. We're very good at it. The battle raged across the solar system, with human ships appearing and disappearing like quantum ghosts. Their movements guided by random chance rather than tactical doctrine. The architect's perfect mathematical predictions were useless against opponents whose next move was determined by the flip of a coin. But as the last architect ship began to retreat, something changed. The vessel's geometry shifted, its perfect angles becoming imperfect, random, chaotic. They're adapting, Brown said grimly. Learning to incorporate chaos into their calculations. The architect ship's new configuration was beautiful in its wrongness. A perfect fusion of mathematical precision and random chance. It began to predict the human ship's random movements, countering chaos with controlled chaos. Interesting, the ship broadcast. Your species has taught us to embrace imperfection. We shall incorporate this lesson into our universal harvest. Velkas felt his hope die as he realized what was happening. Humanity's greatest weapon, their ability to be unpredictable, was being turned against them. The architects were learning to be random. "Brown," he transmitted, "they're using our own tactics against us." "I know," she replied, "which is why we're switching to Plan B." "What's Plan B?" Brown's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "We're going to do something so stupid, so completely illogical, that even chaos theory will give up trying to explain it." Through the tactical display, Velkas watched as every human ship in the solar system began moving toward the architect vessel. Not tactically, not strategically. They were simply flying straight at it, weapons blazing, in a charge that would have made their ancient cavalry ancestors proud. The architect ship's sensors registered the approaching fleet and calculated millions of possible responses. But there was one thing it couldn't calculate: the sheer, bloody-minded determination of a species that had crawled up from the primordial soup by refusing to accept that anything was impossible. As the human fleet closed distance, Brown made one final transmission. "Admiral, I want you to remember something. The universe has been trying to kill humanity since we first learned to walk upright. We're still here, and we're still really pissed about it." The collision course was set. The outcome was chaos. And somewhere in the quantum foam between realities, the surviving architects began to realize they had made a terrible mistake. They had thought humanity to be unpredictable. Now they were about to learn what humans did when they stopped being random and started being inevitable. The human fleet's suicidal charge towards the architect vessel should have been over in seconds. The alien ship's reality-warping weapons fired continuously, bending space-time into killing geometries that should have obliterated anything made of mere matter. Instead, the human ships kept coming. "Impossible," the architect transmitted, its perfect mathematical mind struggling to process what it was seeing. "Probability cascades indicate 99.97 destruction rate. Your vessels should not exist." Captain Brown's response came through static as her flagship's hull began to glow from dimensional stress. "Math doesn't account for human stubbornness." Admiral Velkas watched in horrified fascination as the human ships plowed through reality distortions that should have scattered their atoms across 17 dimensions. Some ships simply refused to acknowledge they'd been hit. Others absorbed reality-warping attacks and kept flying. Their crews apparently too busy shooting back to notice they were technically dead. "How are they still functional?" General Thexmore's voice cracked with disbelief. "They're not thinking about it," Brown replied, as her ship's section began existing in 2 dimensions simultaneously. "You can't kill something that's too focused on killing you to die properly." The architect ship's sensors registered impossible readings. Human vessels that had been mathematically destroyed were still firing weapons. Crews that existed in probability states of 0.003% survival were manning their stations. The laws of physics were being overruled by something far more fundamental: human spite. As the fleet closed to point-blank range, the architect finally understood what it was facing. These weren't rational beings using advanced tactics. These were predators operating on instinct, so ancient it predated logic itself. You're not using technology, the architect realized. You're using will. Took you long enough, Brown said, as her ship rammed directly into the architect vessel's hull. The collision should have been impossible. Matter striking folded space-time should have resulted in mutual annihilation. Instead, both ships became locked in combat, with human boarding parties somehow finding purchase on surfaces that existed in 17 dimensions. Velkaz's sensors went haywire as he watched the impossible. Humans in simple environmental suits fighting reality-warping entities in hand-to-hand combat. The architects, beings of pure mathematics, found themselves being punched by creatures who insisted that fists were valid arguments against theoretical physics. "This is insane," Velkaz transmitted. "No," came a new voice. Dr. Elena Smith, the xenobiologist who had been studying the architect technology. "This is evolution. The architects eliminated everything irrational from their reality. They forgot that sometimes the universe doesn't care about your calculations." Through the chaos of battle, Velkaz began to understand. The architects had spent eons protecting their mathematical approach to existence. They had created a reality where everything followed logical rules, where probability could be calculated and controlled. But they had never encountered a species that had evolved to fight reality itself. Every species in a galaxy learned to work with the universe, Dr. Smith continued. Humans learned to tell it to go to hell and make it stick. The boarding action reached the architect ship's core. Not a bridge or command center, but a space where mathematics took physical form. Equations floated in the air like living things. Probability cascades flowed like rivers, and the very concept of existence was laid bare in geometric perfection. Captain Brown and her team stood in the center of it all, weapons raised, completely unimpressed by the cosmic significance of what they were seeing. Magnificent. The architect's voice resonated from everywhere and nowhere. You have entered the heart of logic itself. Here your crude matter-based existence is meaningless. Brown looked around at the swirling mathematics. The fundamental forces of reality made visible, the actual operating system of the universe. Then she pulled out a grenade. "Lady, I've been married to a mathematician for 15 years. I know exactly what to do with complicated equations." The explosion was small by cosmic standards. Just a simple chemical reaction converting matter to energy in the most straightforward way possible. But in a space where mathematics was reality, where every calculation had to be perfect, the introduction of random chaos was catastrophic. Equations collapsed, probability cascades reversed. The fundamental constants that held the architect ship together decided they didn't want to be constant anymore. As the ship began to disintegrate around them, the architect's final transmission carried something that had never existed in its previous reality. Wonder. "Incredible. You have shown us that perfection is a prison. Chaos is beautiful." The architect vessel collapsed into normal space-time, its exotic matter hull reverting to simple physics. As it died, it transmitted one last message, not to the humans, but to its surviving kin throughout the galaxy. "The harvest is complete," it said. "We have learned what we came to find. Velkas felt his blood freeze. Brown, what did it mean? Captain Brown, floating in the wreckage of the architect's ship, was studying readings that made no sense. They weren't here to destroy us, she said slowly. They were here to learn from us. The tactical display lit up with new contacts. More architect ships emerging from hyperspace. But these vessels were different. Their perfect geometric forms had been altered, incorporating elements of chaos and randomness into their design. We have been perfection, the lead ship transmitted. Now we shall be perfect chaos. The universe will be remade not in order, but in beautiful, wonderful randomness. Dr. Smith's voice crackled over the comm. They're not invaders anymore. They're converts. We've taught them to embrace chaos, and now they want to spread it. Velkas watched as the hybrid architect ships began moving toward the galactic rim, carrying with them humanity's gift of controlled chaos. But something in their transmission made him deeply uneasy. Brown, he said carefully, what happens when beings with the power to rewrite reality decide to remake the universe based on human principles? There was a long pause before Brown replied, Admiral, I think we're about to find out if the rest of the galaxy is ready for a universe that operates on human logic. As the architect fleet vanished into hyperspace, carrying humanity's chaotic philosophy to every corner of existence, one final transmission echoed across the solar system. The old universe was built on order. The new universe will be built on the principle that anything is possible if you're stubborn enough to make it happen. Velkas stared at the tactical display, watching reality itself begin to flicker at the edges as the architects started their work. Somewhere in the distance, he could swear he heard the universe itself starting to develop a sense of humor. Brown, he said quietly, I think we may have just broken everything. Her response carried the weight of absolute certainty. Admiral, welcome to the human universe. Hope you like it chaotic.